Good evening to all members, officers of the council and any members of the public present or who may be watching on YouTube.
So sorry, Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
I apologise, members, I was muted. Good evening to all members, officers of the council and any members of the public and press who may be watching on YouTube. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have apologies from Councillor Burrell, Councillor Garden and Councillor Cutler.
Thank you. Are there any further apologies?
Councillor Julie Ozog.
Thank you. Can somebody try to stop this echoing back? Everything is like I'm in an echo chamber. I'm sorry, members, this is taking a mind of its own. It's muting when it likes. The Strategic Director, Internal Services, in the exercise of her delegated authority, in consultation with the Monitoring Officer, has granted a dispensation to all parish councillors to speak and vote on agenda item 11, financial contributions to parishes and town councils 2021-22. Because otherwise so many members of the council would have to presidential interest in the matter and it would impede the transactions and business. Do any members wish to declare any other interests? No, done. I call upon the Leader of the Council to move that the minutes of the General Assembly of the Council held on the 12th of October 2020 be confirmed as an accurate record. Is that seconded?
Hang on, I haven't done it yet, but good evening, Mr. Mayor.
That's the trouble.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm very, very happy to move that these the minutes are a correct and accurate record.
Seconded.
No. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
I would like to make the following announcements. There was not a lot to say for the last two mayor's announcements, so I'll paint it on to this one. I was honoured to be able to send Betty Bullock, who was 100, a bunch of flowers on behalf of myself and all councillors. I tried to make sure they understand it's from all of us, and it's a very good age to get. I was able to attend Remembrance Sunday for everybody because I know everybody couldn't attend, but I'm representing all of you when I go. So for those who would normally attend and couldn't, I've done my best for it. I had to turn down an opportunity for land breaking at Countryside and Clarendon because of the coronavirus. And I've had to delay an opening of Snack Shack. Well, they're opening it, but I've had to say I'll go along later to deal with it because of this coronavirus. It's been a very strange year. It's going to affect the mayor's charities extremely because we missed the end of last year because at the end of my mayor's year last year, obviously the main functions for fundraising were cancelled. Most of it's been cancelled this year, but we've done our best and we have raised some money. Anyway, thank you, members. And after with that, we'll move on. Councillor Carter, any announcements that you wish to make?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few, yes. First of all, I'm not going to talk too much about the coronavirus tonight because I think we're all we can all see exactly what's going on around us, and we've seen some news this afternoon regarding London, our near neighbours. There was, I think, a little bit of surprise when a week or so ago we were placed into tier, or 2 weeks ago we were placed into tier 3, and our neighbours in London were in 2. Given the changing nature of the figures, I think we've seen one of the inevitable results of that today, and that London will now from Wednesday also be moving into Tier 3. I don't have any advance information about what our prospects are on the 16th of December. I was in a meeting last week where the methodology was explained to us, and just for clarification to members, it doesn't involve local councils this time around. There is no particular local input in it. It's being decided from a central algorithm based upon health and public health and hospital information. So you can make of that what you will, but so I have no particular information about our prospects of moving out of Tier 3 on December the 16th, but I think we are all aware of the mounting problems. And one of the things I would say is that we are so close now. We've seen this amazing arrival of the virus. We've seen all those pictures of people starting to, the vaccine. We've seen all the pictures of people getting the doses of vaccine in the especially vulnerable bracket. We are so close now to what will be a wider rollout of the vaccine that I think I would echo those calls that say we really mustn't take our foot off the pedal now. We are going into Christmas, and obviously there is a period of released and loosened restrictions over Christmas. But I think we are very keen to make the point that just because you can do these things, it doesn't make them compulsory. You don't have to, and that quite frankly, the more restraint that people can show over this period, I think the better we will be, and the quicker we will be out of this problem and able to gather together again properly in 2021. So I'm going to just stop there in terms of my coronavirus announcement. Sorry about my phone. I'll switch it off in a minute. If I then move on to Remembrance Day, Remembrance Day is such an important point in our calendar. We were determined not to not hold it. I mean, at the end of the day, if the people we were commemorating were able to put up with all the ravages of war and the difficulties of war, then I think it behoves us to do our very best to carry on with the commemoration. And I am hugely indebted to Mr. Twyman, and he will always say his team, but I do know that, of course, it was a team effort, but I think Mr. Twyman bore an awful lot of responsibility and worry over that service, and it was amazing, and I don't think that we could have done it any better, actually. I think it went fantastically from beginning to end, and so I'm very, very grateful to Mr. Twyman in particular, but also the team, the stewards, everybody who worked on it from the officer point of view here, to the members who attended, and as the Mayor has said, we all did our very best to represent each other and to make sure we put on a united front for the Borough of Dartford on that day. I'm also very pleased to announce that the Dartford Youth Council were very active as well, and they brought a representative, and they conducted themselves with enormous dignity on the day, and they were able to represent the ongoing story of commemoration and remembrance, which is so important to us, representing our young people superbly. So my thanks to them. We have, as you now know, members, received the resignation of one of our colleagues, Ian Armitt. It wasn't unexpected. He had let us know for a very long time that this was one of his plans. In fact, it was such a badly kept secret. I think even the opposition knew that it was happening. So we knew that Ian and Lynn planned to look at their next phase of their life in a different direction, and that's absolutely great. And I wish them well. Just a quick word about Ian. He is just the very model, actually, of a local representative, and he has built up. I mean, we talk an awful lot about personal votes in this business, and Ian is the absolute model and epitome of what a personal vote means. There were people who voted for Ian at a constituency and ward level who I know will have had different persuasions in national elections and other elections and referendums and things, would have disagreed with him violently about stuff, but they voted for Ian because of his very personal approach to looking after his ward. As I said in my letter to him, he knew exactly how to pull the levers of power, and more importantly, he also knew the restraint of not pulling them. He knew when something was not good for the town or good for the borough or even good for his ward, and he was always willing to let people know at that early stage that that was what he planned to do. Yes or no, or possibly. He was always very open and honest about what his intentions were in representing people, and that's a rare thing. Over the years, he was occasionally precious and precocious. He had his own ideas about things, and it meant that as leader of the council, he sometimes clashed with me, and Occasionally he was almost right, but he was always, whenever we had a discussion, he was always incredibly courteous. And he never, ever once put friendship or loyalty on the line. He simply made his point very straightforwardly. And it was always about his constituents. I don't recall him ever coming to me about anything relating to him personally. It was always about his constituents in his ward. And normally we always resolved it in a way that meant he won in the end. I'm going to miss him terribly. I think we all will. Amazing force for good around the council, absolutely dedicated to the Orchard Theatre, dedicated to fairness in planning. He was an amazing mayor, 3 terms. He was just a model of local governance. And I think at some point, when we say goodbye to colleagues in these circumstances, it's not really appropriate to say goodbye to them just on a Zoom call. So I think as soon as we're able to, we'll drag him back and we'll have a proper celebration and commemoration of his work. My final announcement, Mr. Mayor, relates to Mr. Harris. It's been a terrible year in terms of loss, and we experienced our own bit of loss earlier on this year with the loss of Graham Harris, our managing director of many years. He was very widely thought of. He had a number of interests, and one of them was rugby. I think many people know that he was a keen rugby player initially, and then follower. He was very interested in enthused when we agreed to build a new headquarters for Dartford Valley Rugby Club. And so we thought it would be nice, as well as the road naming, which we've done. And there is now a road called Harris, I think Harris Way, or Harris Avenue, in the new development at Littlebrook. We thought it'd be really nice to institute something that would be a lasting memorial to Graham. And so with the help and cooperation of Dartford Valley Rugby Club, I'm pleased to announce that we will be sponsoring an annual event for local schools, an annual series of games, a rugby day for local schools, which will be named in his honour. We're going to provide a nice trophy for it, and it means that for the foreseeable future, there will be an opportunity for us to also remember Graham and his contribution to the council. Mr. Mayor, that's it for my announcements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Members, I'm advised that Councillor Cosine has submitted 2 questions under Standing Order 14. Councillor Cosine, would you like to ask your first question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We all recognise the importance of progressing Brexit, but does the leader of the council agree with me that Dartford's current infrastructure already struggles with existing traffic? And does he agree with me that a lorry park will worsen the situation to the detriment of Dartfordians?
Councillor Kite, would you like to respond?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think I've always been clear that the right location for lorry facilities connected to Brexit is in places where the vehicles can best be handled with the minimum of impact on local communities. To me, it's not ideal to have so many of those facilities in Kent. I've never thought so, and I've spoken openly about that in the past. When so many lorries originate from outside the county, it seems to me that there was an opportunity to trap them before they crossed the bridge and to deal with them closer to their home before they got to what might appear to be a bottleneck in Kent. To be fair, however, now we know more about the government's plans. It does seem that the technology now being used by the government to ensure freight traffic is ready for transit is moving on and developing fast, and it does rely on a high degree of digital compliance and monitoring, with the majority of vehicles being dealt with before they get to these facilities. And journeys are only interrupted where a non-compliant vehicle is picked up by ANPR as it enters what I think was amusingly called the digital border of Kent, but it's simply an array of ANPR cameras, which effectively is the trigger point for fines if lorries aren't prepared. Lorries are then further separated by a classification according to their load, and a proportion of them will require processing in Kent. The issue, therefore, is where you carry that out and where you make lorries park and wait. Now, the shadow leader, and indeed for that matter, his colleague, local member Danny Nicklin, might prefer with me that Ebbsfleet was not one of these HMRC facilities, but I'm sure they would also agree with me that there is something far worse than it being there, and that is that they have a facility without any holding capacity that forces lorries to wait by the side of roads, and most worryingly of all, looking for casual and short-term parking in residential areas. In short, once we have lorries coming into the county, it's better for us to handle them than to allow them to make their own decisions and just mooch around in residential communities. The permission for the proposed HMR facility at Ebbsfleet was granted subject to an operational management plan, which includes proposals for managing the traffic. Our council officers at Dartford have met with those behind these plans, and we have impressed upon them the specific traffic issues in the area and the situation with regard to traffic congestion, and made it clear that even under normal traffic conditions, traffic flows can be affected by incidents in the area, and it takes a long time for them to clear. The response to all that has been a commitment to ensure HGVs use the main routes and, for example, do not leave the A282 at junction 1A or 1B if they've used the Dartford crossing. Signage is crucial at these junctions to ensure traffic travelling to the facility uses the A282 A2 rather than local roads. HMRC confirmed that the majority of vehicles travelling to the facility will be vehicles that were already using the M25, A282 and A2 or M20 to travel to the coast, and therefore the provision of the facility is a stop-off point for vehicles that actually would have already been on the network. There is no particular prediction of a large number of extra vehicles finding their way onto the network. It's just that they will be stopping, or some of them will be stopping at Ebbsfleet. The difference, of course, from the existing conditions is that we must ensure these vehicles are not allowed to develop their own preferred routes in or out of the facility. However, Mr. Mayor, I am realistic enough to know that the early days of an operation at this site does, of course, carry the risk that's associated with unfamiliarity of any new highways facility. Therefore, the need for enforcement and traffic management will be at its greatest at that point. It's worth making the point, though, Mr. Mayor, as I come to a conclusion, that no haulier wants their lorries to be on local roads any more than we do. And the community share exactly the same inclination as hauliers, which is that those lorries should be on the national network and moving as quickly as possible. So the natural inclination of everyone in this business will be to get those lorries back on the strategic network as quickly as possible. So, Mr. Mayor, the short answer is that whilst I would have preferred this facility to have been in Essex, the technology, the highways plan, and the developing situation do seem to point to Kent and Ebbsfleet. As he knows, or as Councillor Gosine knows, I have instigated several communications with the shadow leader about the facility, and the duty is now upon us to apply constant pressure and make constant representations to make it work for local people. Mr. Mayor, this is not an issue now where objecting to the proposal is going to be enough, or it's actually not likely to be helpful either. It requires us now to take the practical steps to ensure that the communities we all care about are protected, and that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. I think that was very clear. Councillor Cosine, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you for your answer there, Councillor Kite. It's actually going to be the issues here that we have is that, for starters, there's 3 councillors, by the way, in Ebbsfleet.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're quite right. Many apologies. I hope I haven't caused a domestic rift. I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. But you know, the thing is here is that when residents were sold their properties, they weren't also being told that there was going to be a lorry park there being built as well. This is an Ebbsfleet Healthy Garden Living Centre. It's meant to be somewhere that's meant to be healthy. They were sold a dream that was going to be, most of these people coming away from London, looking to live in a more quieter area. They're looking to, you know, they've invested a lot of money in this. It's going to be hurt, not only affecting their health, but it's actually going to affect them financially as well. Would you agree with me that perhaps they should be compensated for what's going to be happening to them?
Councillor Kite, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I will. I understand as a local member you will want to make those representations, and I understand why, and I perhaps understand why you want to do it at this time. But the simple fact is, it was always a car park. It is actually part of the Ebbsfleet Railway Station, Ebbsfleet International Rail Station car park facilities, and was already always planned and master planned as a car park. So it was never actually planned as part of the green idyll part of the Garden City. And of course, everything that I've just said in my first answer is designed to ensure that lorries don't impinge upon that. I think what you and I and Councillor Mrs. Gosine need to be really, really careful of with Councillor Nicklin is to make sure that all the things we've been told will happen do happen. Now, I've been honest and candid with you about my understanding that at the beginning of these things, when there may be confusion, which is actually almost impossible to stop when you have a new facility of this kind, there may well be confusion and there may well be a need for greater enforcement in those early days to stop exactly what you've talked about happening. Now, if that, we've got to work together to make sure we do that, and we've got to make sure those lorries leave and enter the facility in exactly the way they're planned to. They mustn't go into the local communities. And in those circumstances, I'm desperately hoping we can get to the point where there isn't a need for compensation, because actually there hasn't been a compensatable loss to local residents. If we can get our job right, and if they do that, if HMRC do things correctly, those lorries will come onto that site and leave that site. But I do say again, this was never a green field. We have actually seen in other places in Kent, we've seen new development of hard standing and work. What we're talking about here, as you know, I think was car park D, was it, or car park C? Car park D, I think it was, which was always a car park. Well, you know then, Claire, it is car park D. It was always a car park attached to the Ebbsfleet International Rail Station, and could theoretically and will occasionally have been full up with traffic anyway. So I think what we've got to do now is just make sure we keep our focus on HMRC and the Highways Agency and the government to make sure that all the promises they've made to us are kept, and that local residents, yours, Councillor Mrs. Gosine's, and Councillor Nicklin's constituents aren't disturbed by this, and that's got to be surely the aim.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Gosine, would you like to ask your second question?
I'd love to come back on what was just said, but I understand I can't. So questions.
So, well, if you understand, there's no point in going into it.
Okay,
I'll talk to him afterwards, Mr. Mayor, anytime. You know that.
All right, Mr. Mayor. I'm all right. Let me.
Well, I don't mind talking to him as well, but go on, ask your next question.
In 2018, the leader said nothing was off the table in the fight for road safety. The 2019 local Conservative manifesto backed the 20 is plenty scheme. How many roads has the council applied to be 20 miles per hour? And besides the mirror on Fleet Estate, what new measures have been introduced?
Councillor Kite, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm perfectly willing to concede that progress towards some of the major improvements we were pushing for, particularly those outside schools, have been slower than I ever thought they would be. But I don't think that's any reason for us to stop fighting for them. And I can assure members that whilst the need to carry out highways design work using our own resources and the impact of the last 9 months have slowed us down, we have made progress, more than I think Councillor Gosine alludes to, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And we will continue until we feel we can do no more. Mr. Mayor, one of the most depressing things I've encountered during this period, aside perhaps from the willingness of some to criticise people who are trying to do the right thing, is the extent to which a small number of parents and drivers seem willing to endorse the concept of children's road safety in principle, but refuse to let it alter their own selfish and downright dangerous parking habits when it comes to their own behaviour and their own parking. I admit this has come as an extraordinary shock to me, and it's made the whole process of finding solutions considerably harder. As a council, we can only enforce against a limited number of street regulations, and we have found that imposing new regulations is neither easy nor fast, particularly when so many school estates are in streets simply never designed for the volume of behaviours, the volume and behaviours of modern drivers. We have made and continue to make, though, progress. Work on highways interventions at a number of schools can now be supported following the appointment of a new officer with highway regulation experience working to Lukman Agbula. And 4 schools in particular are the subject of significant proposals. At Brent School, the proposal is to implement flashing 20 miles an hour advisory lights to provide safer crossing for pupils, and a wider 20 mile an hour zone on roads within the vicinity of the school. The conversion of an existing staggered crossing to a zebra crossing to offer precedence for pedestrians, and a review of the management of school entrances in London Road and St John's Road, and of course the scheme to address parking issues and two-way operation around St John's Road. At Fleetdown Primary School, the proposals include the introduction of double yellow lines and new drop curbs for corner protection by Loondale Road and Estdale Close, the provision of a flashing advisory 20 mile an hour sign, traffic light, and the provision of a crossing to provide safer crossing facilities for pupils. Finally, Mr Mayor, on the subject of the Fleet Estate, members may anticipate a provision in the 2021 grants budget to provide funding for the creation of a holistic suite of community measures focused upon creating a family-friendly fleet down, a significant part of which will include speed mitigation measures across the community. Mr Mayor, I view this project as a pathfinder for other willing and distinct communities across the borough. At Manor Road in Swanscombe, officers are already working on the use of central government grants to provide evidence quality CCTV to support the work of parking colleagues, and a report on this will come to the council executive in due course. Finally, Mr Mayor, at Temple Hill, I can confirm that I had discussions just a month ago with Michael Payne, the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transportation, along with Simon Jones, KCC's Director of Highways, regarding the useful deployment of the central government's active travel grant for a scheme under the government's School Streets initiative that would see proposals brought forward for consultation that involve safe and traffic-free zones around schools, with exclusions only for residents and school staff at certain times. Mr Mayor, DBC, of course, is not a highways authority, and nor do we have control of schools. But we nevertheless put our head above the parapet to find solutions to these problems. And I think we can see that as money and support and policy bends towards us, we are taking the opportunity to use that to improve safety step by step. With regard to manifesto commitments, I'm perfectly happy to be completely candid and say that more than one has been set back by this extraordinary public health event of the last year. Indeed, how could it not be? The capital and revenue outturn reports by the council to Cabinet last week, and again in front of you this evening, lay bare both the preparations we made to deliver on those proposals in the first place and the huge impact that COVID has had upon them. I am grateful for the opportunity to make clear that, particularly for those projects that will make a great difference to our community, like the refurbishment of playgrounds, the completion of new public spaces at Central Park and elsewhere, and parking and safety improvements across the borough, this has just been a delay caused by one extraordinary year, and both the budgets and the ambitions will return in 2021. I would say to him, though, that a good manifesto commitment is worth waiting for more than a bad commitment delivered. I'm gratified to find that whenever attempts are made to encourage residents to believe that dangerous parking is somehow the fault of either council officers or councillors, the vast majority of decent residents refuse to take the bait and return again and again, quite rightly, to the personal responsibility of every driver and every parent to behave safely. I inwardly rejoice, although I must not reflect it in policy, whenever a dangerous bit of parking is named and shamed on social media. There is, Mr Mayor, an old saying that it's much easier to throw rocks at a house than to build one. And I hope that the Shadow Leader will accept from me an invitation to be part of the efforts to find a solution to these problems, rather than be a commentator. If he indicates that today and indicates a willingness to be involved with it, I will arrange with him to meet with me without delay, to lay completely open to him the work being done on a number of fronts to tackle road safety issues throughout the borough. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. Councillor Cosine, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do accept your invitation, Councillor Kite, and thank you for that. I think it's important that we do work together in situations like this, especially when it comes to safety. We're talking about children here. People are frustrated that people that are parking in these areas are, it's dangerous. And in the last month, there's been 3 children that's been knocked down. I think last week a lady was knocked down only 100 yards from where someone was killed. Last summer or the summer before, I can't remember which one it was. But what I'm trying to say here is that there needs to be an urgency, if you like, with this as well, because of what's happening with the fatalities in the area. And I do welcome that. And I was just wondering, when I meet with you, will we have some sort of plan that we can put together where we can look at timescales as well, that we can start to get these things implemented?
Councillor Kite, would you like to respond to the supplementary question?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Gosain may not remember the circumstances of the incident he's talking about, but I do, and we are actually working with the family now, following an introduction from Councillor Grian, to actually provide a permanent memorial to that individual who lost their life at East Dartford. And so we do take these matters very seriously. And I think one of the things that I find, I've got very broad shoulders. One of the things I find a little hard to bear sometimes is when criticism becomes personal, because we have tried very hard to do stuff which is out with our normal responsibilities as a council. As I say, we're not the Highways Authority and we're not a school authority. We put our head above the parapet to try and solve these problems. And I think they are taking longer, but we are doing what lots of councils in our position don't bother to do at all, which is to get out there and try to hassle and to hustle to make things happen. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, in terms of the timing, you're quite right. Yes, there is indeed plans with timings. I haven't gone through them all today, but everything I've spoken to you there has got timings. And I'll be candid with you. They were mid 2021 to implementation in 2022. Now, I know that sounds like a very, very long way away, but messing around with people's highways and the simple legislative path through it is extraordinarily difficult. You have to make sure that nothing you do is going to create anything that's worse than you have. It doesn't seem possible you might do that, but we nevertheless have to justify it. There's an extended period of consultation that's required. And I'll also be honest with you and say that during the pandemic, we did not have a recruitment drive on to actually get the people in we needed to do it. And that's only been completed relatively recently. I'm confident now we do have the expertise in-house. In fact, we probably have more expertise than a council of our tier and responsibilities would normally need. And we have that specifically so we can get information on highway regulations, and whether we complete this work through our own in-house resource or through consultants outside, it will help us speed it up. So the answer I give to Councillor Gosain is yes, I would expect him to be interested in the plan, and I'd expect him to be interested in the timing. But all I say to him is, as I say, please remember, as I said, it's easier to throw rocks at a house than to build one. And so let's all work together to understand that we're trying very hard to do the right thing. And because something takes longer, or we meet failures and we meet problems, it doesn't necessarily mean that the will wasn't right. So when we meet, I will lay all that open to him and he can ask all the questions he wants.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kite. Members, I'm advised a motion has been submitted under Standing Orders 10 by the Shadow Deputy Leader of the Council. Councillor Graham, would you like to propose your motion?
I would, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that all members of the chamber will agree there's been some fantastic work for a long time, but particularly over the last 9 months, from people from all over our community to ensure that there aren't people going hungry. And I want to say on record that I've worked with members from all sides of the chamber in various voluntary projects to make sure that there is no one going hungry in Dartford. And I think that's something we can be very proud of as individuals, as a group and as a community. It seems likely that, unfortunately, food poverty is going to become a bigger issue in the months ahead when furlough ends and with the uncertainty that faces us next year. I would like to propose that we take some of the actions that I've described in the motion to ensure that the good work that is going on is harnessed, is put into a collective, there's somebody collectively responsible for all of it, and that we can take the goodwill and the good work forward as a community and ensure that none of the lessons of the last 9 months are wasted, and that this is a town where nobody goes hungry. I gather there's some issue with some of the figures that I've used in the motion. I'm more than happy to withdraw any of those figures. They're all figures I took from public documents, and I certainly don't want any of those figures causing any dismay to anyone or being a reason why anyone would vote against the motion, because that's not what the motion is about. The spirit of the motion is that we can go forward and make sure that as a council we are working in the best way possible to ensure that everybody in this town is able to access food, and that all the expertise that is coming from various people and volunteers can be harnessed as we move forward. And I think that the evidence seems to suggest that when you have a lead member or a cabinet member in charge of that, it gives it overall give somebody an overall ability. Sorry, my cat's meowing. It gives you an overall foresight and oversight to ensure that the best possible practice can be pursued. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham.
Forgive me. You might need to just formally propose the motion.
Motion.
Yeah, so I formally propose the motion as outlined in. Do you want me to read the whole thing? Isn't it?
No.
No. So I formally propose the motion as outlined under item 7 in the agenda.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Right. I think it's, who's taking the vote? I think it's Sherry.
Mr. Mayor, I have an amendment to make, if that's okay,
right.
to
Yep, yep.
propose,
I'll-
which I will propose, and I think Councillor Shipham's going to second for me. I too understand that this isn't intended to be an aggressive or provocative motion, and I think there's much with which we can agree, and frankly, it suits the agenda for all of us if we can work more closely together with the new and the old friends that we've rediscovered during this period to work across the third sector and with other organisations. However, I do have a couple of amendments, and I think Councillor Green has alluded to one of them. In the first paragraph, where there is talk of the 2016 Food Foundation figures and the survey, I will make the point that there is a slightly exaggerated phrase. I do understand this is probably something that's come from public documents that have been, it's a bit like Chinese whispers, over time they change, and these figures are 5 years old now, and I guess over time people will embellish them and they'll use them, and then certain phrases will creep in. So the phrase I had problem with this, was actually, there is no question of 5 million people under that survey regularly going an entire day without eating. The survey actually addressed the issue whether in the last 12 months somebody had done that. It might seem a small point, but actually it's important for us to be on with credible evidence. So my proposal, Mr. Mayor, is we delete that. With regard to the second paragraph, I hope members opposite will accept that this isn't intended to be provocative or unhelpful. It's simply putting it right again in terms of phraseology. So there is a reference in there to children living in poverty. And again, I think it's important, if we use a figure, we should use the right data set for that. And the data set involved, it takes not the definition of poverty, but it takes the definition of a family defined to have absolute low income, that is income below 60% of median income. So that new paragraph will read in total that this year the children in low income families local measure found 3,304 children to be living in a family defined to have absolute low income, brackets, that is income below 60% of median income in Dartford, close brackets I should say, in Dartford. The third paragraph, I only changed this really for a reason which I think is in all our interests, which is to suggest that amongst the organisations that have done an enormous amount of work this year is the council itself, not just as a provider of funding, but actually as a direct provider of food. And our officers here, I think, deserve to know that we respect that and we include them within our understanding of those organisations that have done well. So my proposal for the third paragraph of the description is that the fantastic job being undertaken by the council, church and voluntary organisations throughout the borough to ensure that no one goes hungry, and the contribution made to voluntary organisations by grants from DBC. So no real change, just the insertion of the council. The fourth paragraph, I'm not proposing to change at all. If members wish me to write to ministers to endorse a UN declaration, which is part of the government's commitments, I will do so. I will say to you, in all honesty, you know me well enough now, I'm not a big one for writing letters to government about UN policy. It's not really part of my local agenda to do that, but if members wish me to, I'm very happy to do. And hopefully my enormous influence inside the UN and inside the government will help swing that debate. With regard to the final paragraph of the notations, this is really cleaning up the grammar, and I don't mean this to be in any way insulting, but it needs to be cleaned up. So the fourth paragraph will read, this council notes that the government's commitment to the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, global goals, which apply internationally and domestically through Goal 2, commits governments to ending hunger by 2030. So we're noting that without any change. Coming then to the resolutions, I don't think it's appropriate for us to have a cabinet member dedicated to this issue, for the simple reason that the way or the style of Dartford is to have cabinet members working on much larger umbrella issues really, and then for the important work underneath to drill down. So what I'm suggesting is that instead of nominating a cabinet member, we appoint a lead member with responsibility. And then it comes onto the issue of food security versus food justice. Now, there is a difference between food security and food justice. The Cooperative Party, for which I think you've now formally made an affiliation as a group, are running, of course, this campaign behind the scenes to get motions like this in front of councils. And they make the point that actually it is food security. They do use the word food justice, I accept that, but they also describe that food justice is effectively known as food security. But there are other reasons for us to focus upon food security rather than food justice. And that is that in all honesty, food justice does have a tendency to have become a politicized and slightly more empowered agenda when it comes to enforcing political change. And whilst that's fine, the Conservative group and the Labour group are perfectly entitled to empower anyone towards, encourage anyone towards making political change. It causes a problem when we ask the officers of this council to implement it, because we shouldn't be asking officers to implement political change. So my suggestion is that instead we use the definition recognised by the UN and recognised by the Co-op, frankly, of food security rather than food justice. So that new first resolution will read, appoint a lead member with responsibility for food security. The second point, I'm not proposing to change at all. So that will be to request the Leader of Dartford Borough Council to write to the relevant minister to ask the government to enshrine its existing commitment to UN Sustainable Development Goal 2 into domestic legislation. As I say, it comes with the caveat that government rarely listen to me on matters of national policy, but they might do, you never know. Item 3, proposal 3, again, really, I just want to make the point that these relationships are not new. So I suggest that we revise that to read, continue to work with local voluntary organisations, schools, churches and other relevant organisations to boost local food security and work with stakeholders to develop and implement a food action plan by the end of 2021 so that the issue of food poverty in Dartford can be accurately quantified and subsequently eliminated. Once again, I've used there the phrase food action plan rather than food justice action plan, and I hope members on the opposite side of the chamber will be reassured that is exactly how the cooperative movement describe their requirement for this. One of their their key aims is to persuade councils to develop a food action plan, and the food action justice plan doesn't appear as one of their objectives. So I hope members will see that we're trying our hardest here to do the right thing. So I won't read it all. Mr. Twyman does have a full copy of our amendments, so I guess we could read it through completely again if you really want me to. But what I'm suggesting is that either later tonight or tomorrow morning we circulate the amended version. But I've done my very best to explain it honestly. I think, Mr. Twyman, as I've been going through, I haven't missed anything that I should have properly informed members in terms of my amendments. There's nothing. I'm not trying to pull a fast one, am I?
No, Leader, it's exactly as you've described, and I'm happy to circulate it after the meeting if members so wish.
Okay, so with that then, I propose the amendment, and I think Councillor Shippen's going to second it.
Is that seconded?
That's seconded, yes.
Thank you. The motion is now open for debate. Councillor Green, you will have a right to reply at the end of the debate. Any member?
You've got Councillor Allison, you've got Councillor Allen and Councillor Madison, if you don't mind me saying, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Councillor Allen first then. Councillor Allen, no, we can't see, Leader. It's good of you to do that. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. I'd like to speak to the amendment. I think it's entirely right and proper, and I welcome it. I think it gives us an opportunity to celebrate as well all the good work that we have been doing for quite a long time, prior even to COVID and the other circumstances, and to really recognise the good work that the voluntary sector do as well. Again, I'd like to add my thanks to the staff at the Civic Centre for the way during the pandemic as well, and that they've come out and helped to deliver all these things and coordinate everything there, and particularly some of the work that I'm personally know about. So really, I'm just really pleased to support the amendment as proposed by the Leader of the Council, and thank you very much.
Councillor Madison. Councillor Madison.
I'm just unmuting, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
I can hear you. You can't be unmuted.
No, just unmuted. That's why I was a little bit slow unmuted. I'd just like to take this opportunity actually to welcome this cooperative approach and welcome this very important motion. We're here, all of us are here across the chamber to work to the benefit of all the members we represent, all the people of Dartford. And I think this is a real move forward. You know, party politics is a pain in the backside to me at times. And I think this approach is really very sensible. And the cooperative movement, I've always been a member of for many, many, many years. And I think more cooperation around the world would be a great help. And this is a good move forward in Dartford. Thank you very much for the amendments. There's a couple of little bits there I might have debated with you, Councillor Kite, but having said that, I think in the spirit of what's moving forward here with this motion, I think we should vote for this unanimously today. Thank you very much. Oh, could I quickly say, Mr. Mayor, your indulgence? This is the first year I've not been able to get round the council to wish everybody a happy New Year, happy Christmas, happy New Year, and give a few sweets and cards out. Could you pass our best wishes on to all the members of staff that are the marvellous work they've done over this last terrible year? Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for indulging me.
Of course, I'll do that for you. It's a pleasure. Councillor Harman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say first that I'm having IT issues tonight, so my camera's not working, unfortunately. I would just like to take the opportunity to echo the very good work done throughout the borough. And in particular, in my own area of Swanscombe and Greenhithe, excellent work has been carried out by two organisations in particular, Swanscombe Food Cellar and St Mary's Church in Greenhithe. They've been very greatly supported by the Borough Council, and I think all our residents are really pleased for that. And I would certainly like to support this motion, as I think it's be a great move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to support the amendment, but before that, I'd like to support the overall thrust of the motion as well, please, in the spirit of cooperation today. As a member for Heathwold, you can understand that sort of perhaps food poverty is not necessarily the top of my agenda. It's something which I'm quite happy to admit I know less about than some other members who work very actively in this space. But through the pandemic and the work that we've done on the special cabinet meetings on this, I've become aware of fantastic work that goes on both at the council and around the borough with voluntary organisations, and so totally agree it's the right thing to do. Food security being the key word for me, I was a little uncomfortable with justice, so I would support the motion wholeheartedly and congratulate both the council, members here that have taken personal initiatives, and also the voluntary sector on the work it's done in this space.
Councillor Moat.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure Davey won't mind. Councillor Butterfield has been one of the very, very first to indicate, and you keep on ignoring her in a way that's now becoming quite uncomfortable.
I certainly don't. Why did you put Councillor Butterfield at the bottom then?
Mr. Mayor,
because you were the third one on the list. I'm sorry, Councillor Butterfield. I just
Mr. Mayor,
it's
always a pleasure. You know that, and
yes,
and I know you weren't ignoring me on purpose.
No.
I'd like to echo what's been said already, but I think if we go back to March when the big bomb went off, didn't it, on the 23rd, coronavirus, what do? And the council brought in all parties, a cross-party working group with officers, and it was sitting around the table, how do we get our heads around this as a council? And that work was done through briefings, everyone knew what was happening, and we fed back to our groups, to our communities, and from that platform, it's built to be a strategic approach to a really tragic situation. And this motion really underpins, I believe, all the work that's gone on these last 9 months. And I really do think it's a pat on the back for everyone involved. But we have not mentioned the schools as well, because the schools have also been a key part in delivering food packages and things as well. So I'd really felt that they should be mentioned as well, because Knockall, I know, has done some really splendid work. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you for letting me talk. And I wholeheartedly give my support to this motion. Thank you.
Pleasure to listen to you. Now, Councillor Moat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sorry, I would just like to support Councillor Lloyd and the fact that I'd like to commend both the motion and the amendment. I think that the motion was slightly going offline a bit, but the amendment brings it back on board. I think it's quite important to recognise, and as a trustee of Mary's Child, one organisation based out of Greenhithe and Stone St Mary's churches, it has to be recognised the amazing generosity of both residents and the council, because there's huge amounts of goodwill being put in on both sides and financed by the council. In fact, I think Councillor Harman and I went out the other day and actually collected a large amount of food, which was actually paid for by the council. So thank you very much for that. I would hope that everyone will accept both the motion and the amendment, because this is so important at the moment. And I think the idea of actually putting it through a lead member is an extremely good idea. I just hope we take this forward in the goodwill it's meant by. Thank you.
Councillor Sando.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to welcome this motion as well, especially the amended version, because I think it brings it all into line. And what I would like to say is I think the council itself have done an absolutely amazing job this time in these current circumstances, because as some of the members are aware, that I'm involved in a meal bank, shall we say, that hands out food on a Sundays. And this week, one of our groups, one of the families that actually made the food and distributed it, only 5 meals were actually served. So I just want to take my hat off to say, to the council, that they've managed to house as many people as they can. And I know even literally last week, I actually spoke to Peter Dossad to say that one individual were actually outside a church, and Peter said, not a problem, I'll get somebody out there and I'll make sure that they've got food, etc. And this was midweek. And so I just wanted to say a big thank you to all the voluntary organisations, the schools, the churches, and also the businesses that are handing out food. And I think it's just absolutely amazing the way the community has all chipped in and come together. So thank you very much, and I wholeheartedly support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sandu. Any other councillors before I go to Councillor Green?
Shadow leaders indicating, Mr. Mayor.
Shadow leader. Councillor Shipham?
No. Shadow leader, not deputy leader.
Oh, sorry.
Leader, sorry.
Oh, Councillor Story.
Oh.
No, try again.
No, it's Councillor Story that's waving her arm.
Oh, right, okay. I thought you was in. Okay, right. So
No.
can I just say, the amendments for me doesn't really alter the spirit or the ethos of what the motion's about. And I quite agree with the amendments. I have no issues with them at all. And I think that it's good that at this festive time as well, that we're showing that we can be unified and we can work together. And it's also good that as Councillor Butterfield said, at the beginning of COVID, we came together and we worked together as a council from all sides of whatever political persuasion you are. And I think it's important that in these times that we do come together and we do that, and the fact that we're supporting this motion as a council, it will be passed. I'm grateful for that, because at the end of the day, it's what benefits the residents. And on that as well, I thank the council for all the work they have done. Talk some more.
Yeah. Councillor Story.
Hello. I think it's been wonderful what people have got done for the people here and the council. Without that, I don't know how people would manage. I wished I was young enough to get out and be there with them. But anyway, it's really wonderful to hear what people have been saying and the support everybody's been getting. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Story. Now, is there any other member before I go to Councillor Green that I can't see? Anybody else? Right. Right then. Right. So, Councillor Kite, would you like to reply, and then Councillor Green?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm replying to the amendment, and then I think it's down to Councillor Green to apply
Yes.
to reply to the. Is that right? I don't know. I don't know. Perhaps you advise
That's what I've been given. That's the advice I've been given.
Okay, all right. Well, with regards to amendment, I'm grateful for members for accepting them. I think it is important that we have a good, credible base of evidence when we go forward. And what we don't want to do is anyone to pick this off and say it's wrong because of this or wrong because of that. And I'm also conscious that there've been other councils, including councils in Kent, that have addressed this motion in a slightly more defensive way. I think they've come round in the end, but they've taken a while to do it. I don't see any point in doing that. I think Medway took that view that they were going to take it offline for a bit and have a look at it and chew the cud. I don't see any point in doing that. I think we are going through a period now where with Brexit ahead of us and with continuing pandemic concerns, it is sensible for us to get on with this as quickly as possible. If I could just say that making a presumption that this is going to be approved, given by the gestures around the table, I can confirm that tomorrow morning I'll be writing to Mr. Twyman to add food security to the list of portfolio responsibilities in the Equalities portfolio. I think it sits most appropriately within Equalities, and I think it's something which is part of our One Dartford initiative. So that's that. And the second point I'll make, again, on the presumption that it's passed tonight, is that I'm going to commission the Policy Overview Committee to take this work on initially. That is a cross-party forum, which I think is, again, respectful of the fact this has been a cross-party agreement tonight. I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to take this away and make it a leaders group or a leaders committee, given the cross-party nature of its formation. And in those circumstances, I'm going to commission the Policy Over Committee to look at this. And Councillor Davis, the chairman, is aware of that, and he's completely amenable to it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Kite. At long last, Councillor Graham, would you like to reply?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to accept the amendments. I will echo what my colleague, Councillor Gosign, said, that the spirit of the motion hasn't been changed by any of the amendments, and I'm happy to proceed to the vote.
Do we need to put it to the vote? Yes. Can we now put it to the vote? Can I ask Sherry Green to take the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, member, can you please state clearly for, against, or abstain, please? Thank you. So, Councillor Anne Allen.
For the amended motion, yes.
Councillor Barham.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Ben Musa.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Butterfield.
For.
Councillor Canham.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Eadie.
For.
Councillor Gaskin.
For.
Councillor Sasha Gosign.
Dinner about 7.
For.
Councillor Romana Gosign.
For.
Councillor Graham.
For.
Councillor Hummock.
For.
Councillor Harman.
For.
Councillor Honeysett.
For the amended motion.
Councillor Jones.
Not present.
Thank you. Councillor Kite.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Madison.
For the motion.
Councillor McLean.
For the amendment.
Councillor Moat.
For.
Councillor Nicklin.
For.
Councillor Oakley Dow.
For.
Councillor Oguntope.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
For.
Councillor Peters.
For.
Councillor D. Reynolds.
For.
Councillor L. Reynolds.
For.
Councillor Sandhu.
For.
Councillor Shipham.
For the amended motion.
Councillor Mrs. Story. Councillor Mrs. Story.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Swinard. Councillor Swinard.
He's not here.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thurlow.
For the amended motion.
Councillor Wells.
For.
Deputy Mayor Councillor Mr. Cairns.
For the amended motion.
Mr. Mayor.
For.
That's unanimous from all members present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to the next thing, I think that's a very important thing we've debated here tonight, and I'm glad to see the outcome of it.
Could I just say, Mr. Mayor, if only the Labour Party would drop Labour and just become cooperative, we'd have more of these occasions, you see.
Yeah, even myself, I've made meals and taken them around. We're taking meals around for Christmas. We've got a load of Christmas dinners to cook indoors.
That was a joke, obviously.
Labour and Conservative go together well, Councillor Kite, you know that.
Yeah, but you're not getting a dinner, Tom. You're overweight.
Oi, oi!
So unkind, Mr. Mayor.
I'm unkind. That's me, just unkind. But think of myself. Look at me. Now, on a more serious note, there are no urgent items for consideration. I move that the council go into committee and that the rules of procedure of committee do apply. Is that seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Councillor Kite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no particular need on us to rush this evening, but I think these matters are relatively straightforward. So I'm conscious that we've been an hour now, and we probably have an audience on YouTube. So let's make sure we deal with these expeditiously. But of course, we won't speed over anything that anybody wants to talk about. So coming then, first of all, to item 9, I can announce that there are no other references from any other committees. Item 10 then is the setting of the council tax base for the borough 2021-22. It's an important kind of statistical thing we have to do every year. I think it is fairly straightforward and fairly obvious, but is there any member want to raise any issues in relation to this? I'm not sure it needs an explanation from officers. It's a straightforward part of our business. No, okay. In that case, could I ask that we, you see the reports and the recommendations in front of you. I propose them. I think, Councillor Shipham, are you going to second for me?
Second.
Members happy with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Anybody not happy, not content? Okay, thank you. Item 11 then is the financial contributions to parish and town councils. Once again, it's been a tough year for these, for all authorities actually. We are one of the few authorities still to continue making contributions to parish and town councils. And although we have been reducing it over the years as our inward grants and inward money has been reducing also, but we are one of the few councils now still to maintain them. And what we've done as a reflection of the fact that this has been a very tough year is we've suspended our gradual reduction. So these have been frozen for this year, which I hope is of use to the parish councils involved. Once again, I'll move. Councillor Shipham.
Seconded.
Okay, is there any debate on this? Anybody want to raise any questions or ask anything? Okay, I can't see anybody. In that case, we'll move on to, are members happy with the recommendation?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank
Agreed.
you. Thank you. Is anybody not content? Great, thank you very much indeed. Item 12 then is the local scheme of support for council tax 2021-22. This again follows on from our base rate setting. It gives us now the opportunity to defend and protect pensioners in line with the agreements made to them, and also those on lower incomes, to set out the range of reliefs that are available to them under the scheme. Once again, it's a complicated formula, but actually quite a simple concept. So I would understand if any member wanted to raise any issues on it, but if I propose it, Councillor Shipham, are you going to second for me?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. On then to the vote. Does any member want to talk on this or discuss this issue in any way? No? Okay, let's move to the vote then. Are members happy with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Is any member not content with the recommendation? Great, thank you. On then to item 13, which is the capital programme budget monitoring progress and projected outturn. We do bring the capital programme here to members for their review. It was considered at Cabinet last week as part of its general review of matters. There's one issue I ought to describe to you, perhaps just in setting this, and I'm sure Mrs. Martin won't mind if I do it, but it's unusual to have an overspend which is actually planned for or has a beneficial outcome. And you'll see that one of the items in here on new homes has a £2 million overspend with a beneficial outcome. It's very unusual. Normally an overspend, or for that matter an underspend, can be regarded as a bit of a budgetary failure. And you'll understand in these context, the reason why a lot of these are swerving about all over the place is entirely down to COVID. It's the fact that we had money we were willing to spend and about to spend and didn't, or extra costs that we've borne as a result of COVID. One of our jobs is to make sure that hidden beneath those figures aren't anything more structural, but I'm convinced that they're not. However, there's this one odd issue which stands out like a sore thumb: £2 million overspend on new homes. I think, let me try and have a stab at explaining it. We receive an amount of money back from government equivalent to the a proportion of the money that is given to us in return for, receipted by us in terms of council house sales under right to buy. And rather curiously, the way the government redistributes the money is that it redistributes it in a quarterly profile based upon the figures 3 years ago for the income to government. So it gives it back to you in those terms, and it demands that we therefore, I'm making a cods of this already, I can feel I'm going hot under the collar because it's so complicated to explain. But fundamentally what we're doing is we are spending money now to make sure that we don't have to send it back to government at the next quarterly profile. And so what we're doing is we're effectively borrowing from tomorrow to pay this work today, to actually get this money spent on new homes for our local people, so that we don't have to send the money back to government. And what happens is that by the time we come to the next quarter, all this will come out in the wash and we'll be back to where we stood. I haven't explained that at all well. Mrs. Martin, if you're still there, if you've got a way of doing it in 30 seconds that's better than that, then I'm happy to hear from you.
I think you explained it fine, to be perfectly honest. It is really a case of we want to spend the money now so that we don't have to repay money with interest. So it is just a case of moving money from one year to another, which we're able to do. Just so that we can avoid that paying back of money, which we certainly don't want to do.
No, okay. I've got Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a very sensible move. It's a wise thing to do at the moment, in the respect that there's opportunities arising with property that the council might be able to acquire, and I think this would be very helpful. You know, if we leave things, it could well be that we do end up having to pay government back money that we really need in Dartford, and we need more rented accommodation in Dartford. So I really welcome this. You know, as you read it, overspend, it sounds terrible, but it's actually wise financial workings. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Great stuff. Well, I think you probably got that point from my explanation of it rather than Mrs. Martin's in that case, Tom. So I'll accept the plaudits for that. Clearly, I explained it extremely well. But yeah, I have to say, as a council, we can't guarantee that we'll always be able to hit the spot, because it's a very precise way of doing it. And unfortunately, when you're building new houses, you don't spend money in that kind of very precise way. So we can't rule out the possibility we'll end up putting money back to the government. Even this year, actually, we might end up with putting some money back to them. But we're doing our damnedest to avoid that, and as you say, to make sure this money remains within Dartford. On the wider report, well, I'll propose it. Councillor Shipham.
Seconded.
Thank you. On the wider report, is there anybody who wants to talk about anything or raise any issues? Thank you. Mrs. Martin, there's nothing in there that you want to raise that's cropped up since the report went to publication, have you?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's take a vote then. Members happy to endorse the recommendations?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Thank you. Anyone not content? Okay, thank you. That's done then. Item 14 then. I regret this being on your paper and I apologise for it being on here. I do try to run an orderly ship, and this is one that just simply sailed on past me without me knowing about it, and I'm not that happy, if I'm honest. I don't approve of things being put on the agenda until we're certain they can come forward, and I apologise that it's arrived on the agenda and now has to be withdrawn. It will come forward in the future. Just for those members who are concerned about it, this doesn't actually, I mean, even its description, I probably would have changed it. It doesn't relate to the whole of Lowfield Street, as you say. I mean, I know it says there 4656 Lowfield Street, but it makes it sound as if it's a larger scheme than it is. This is a single property which may be required for us in order to ensure that the entire Lowfield Street scheme goes ahead. And just for clarification, this I think would be the very first CPO we've made on Lowfield Street. I know that the sort of the general feeling in Dartford is that we've CPO'd all over the place in Lowfield Street. The simple fact is we haven't. Everything was done by private treaty, and this I think will be our first intervention of powers on Lowfield Street, and it simply unblocked something which otherwise cannot be unblocked. And the reassurance I give you is when it does come forward, of course, it will be based upon the fairness of evaluation. So that's that. So I'm sorry that's been withdrawn. Item 15 then, Law Commission Hate Crime Laws, a consultation paper. It's an important issue for us here. And I actually think we as a council, we do receive an awful lot of consultation papers to respond to. And that's because when people in organisations and government departments are consulting, they will always at some point get to local councils and say, well, we must put it out to them. It doesn't mean they're all directly targeted at us, but this is one that, if I put it this way, it wasn't targeted at us, but it's probably quite relevant to us. And so you see the report or the response that you have there. It's quite a brief report, and it's done in the form of a report to us rather than a formal response, although we will make the response to them in the form that's in the paper. But that's because this is effectively for the legal, the criminal justice system consultation in relation to tariffs and the extension of description of hate crime and the number of offences to which it could be attached. And I think you've seen what the council is proposing there. And I hope, again, that's a matter which will impress in terms of the way that our council is responding to something in this way. It's an important issue, and I think it's right that we respond to it. I'll propose it. Mr. Shipham, Councillor Shipham?
Yep, seconded.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Anybody want to raise anything on this item at all? Yeah, Councillor Madison again. Yeah.
Just to say, Chairman, that it's this is where all members actually can work vigilantly in the respect that when
it's easy for you to say.
Easy for me. This is where members can come forward if they do come across anything in the great ether out there that is beneficial to the council, and the council haven't received it, and we feel it is something that should go forward with a good response, which I'm sure, and this is a good response, although it had to be done quite fairly quickly. I think it's an excellent response by the officers on behalf of the council. I mean, there's other things that come forward, aren't there, you know, and it's, if members see it, that's what we're here for. Bring them forward and see if we can debate it and do something together as a council to make a big difference for the people of Dartford.
Well, you're quite right. I mean, I've got you, Councillor Oakley down. You're quite right. We've got we get asked to be consulted upon on everything from, you know, Port of London Authority to Civil Aviation Authority and flight plans and all that kind of stuff. And we have to juggle those that are directly relevant. But I absolutely get that in terms of the impact on our community, these are things that could impact directly on people from Dartford. So that's why I was very happy to accept it into the paper, even into the report, even at a late stage. Councillor Oakley Dow.
Yeah, I'd like to echo everything that's been said, but I'd specifically like to commend the very speedy response of the officers to this having been brought to their notice, and just the sheer calibre of the response. There was no discussion. It was obvious to the officers the appropriate response, and I'd just like to strongly commend that as an elected member. That it's a great reassurance to me to know that we have officers of the calibre that we have that respond in the way that they did, in the speed that they did. Thank you.
Yep, I concur with that. I think it's a quality piece of work, and you're right. I mean, actually, as a council, I mean, I know I would say this, wouldn't I? But we do actually punch above our weight as a council, you know. And when you see, I don't know if you ever get a chance to watch other Zoom meetings that go on around the county of other councils and even other places. I watched one council meeting the other day for no other reason that the Times reported that a councillor set fire to himself during the course of it, and it made me laugh. And I watched it, and he had a candle on his desk, and as he was talking, his papers were up in flames, and those kind of things can happen. But as I watched the caliber of the conversation, and I actually thought I'm incredibly impressed with the way Dartford does its business, really, and we're always focused on people, and that's why if I sometimes come across as curt and short when it comes to some of the things that we get asked to do and asked to respond to, it's because I'm determined to make sure, and I know my colleagues are as well, that we focus on the people of Dartford and absolutely what matters to them in their daily lives. There are some global issues that, of course, we can't be silent upon, but fundamentally our job is to improve things for Dartford, and that's what we try and do. So I too echo those comments on behalf of the officers. They did move very fast, drew it to my attention, and off they went, and they're quality people, and it's a quality response. I absolutely get that. Okay, members happy with it then?
Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Is anybody not content? Okay, thank you. That then wraps that up in terms of the committee part of it. Before I go, I will just offer my celebration and congratulations for the season as well. A very, very happy Christmas to you. This has been a dreadful, dreadful, strange year. We've lost some friends. We found some new neighbours. We've, I think, found the best of ourselves and occasionally the worst of the human condition out there. We came into this year thinking we were probably the strongest of the species, and I think we've been brought low by nature this year, and perhaps that's a good lesson, really. It's a hard lesson and it's cost us an awful lot, but I do think we've also seen a huge amount of a wonderful response out there. So from my point of view, to every member of the council, and I agree with the response we took to our cross-party working, it was enormously valuable. I am willing to keep those cross-party conversations going. I'm not sure we formally need to do it as much anymore because we're not so much in the driving seat, and we actually have many of those issues that we talked about are now resolved and running on rails. But my final point to you is please make sure that every member of your community is aware that the council is still here to operate services. We've never stopped providing help and advice and food right through school holidays and through the summer holidays and through the period now as we go into a new tier or have been in a new tier. We keep on providing those services, and we're here for people throughout. The phone numbers, I think, are relatively, we have sent something to every household now. I think probably members will have received that, and we are promoting those numbers, so we're available and we're here. But a very, very happy Christmas to all of you. A very, very happy Christmas to all of our former councillors who might be looking in, even those who have aspirations to become councillors again. In this season of goodwill, I will even offer my happy Christmases to those. So thank you much, Dee. That does it for me. So, Mr. Mayor, back to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kite. No cabinet minutes have been reserved for debate. So this brings us to the end of the agenda. I would like to wish all members, officers watching on YouTube a very Merry Christmas and a happy 21. And can I also say, whatever your beliefs or disbeliefs, may whoever watches over you go with you through this coronavirus for next year. Good night, and that concludes the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and a healthy New Year. Stay safe.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Bye.